Welcome to the Earning Freedom Program. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com, and I'm here again in my office in beautiful Orange County, California, excited to share just another inspiring message, or at least I hope you find it inspiring, a message for those of you who are working through our mastermind program. And the reason I'm excited is because we're coming to the end of this mastermind course actually right now. We've spoken about the various prerequisites, and I'm going to do a real quick recap in the initial stages that get us to where we are. But at this stage, in this module, I will be talking about how all of those steps lead to achievement that you need to be celebrating every single day, because every small achievement you move toward is going to lead you to a bigger achievement. I'm going to explain a little bit about how that worked for me, how it has worked, how that strategy has worked for other people, why masterminds inspired me to pursue this path, and why I think it can work for each of you. It all begins with you choosing to embrace this principled, deliberate approach to success, regardless of where you are today, regardless of what bad decisions you've made in the past, regardless of the current conditions that you're currently struggling through. There's always a path to break through. That's what I have always found. That's what I learned from people like Mandela, who was taken into custody under, not because he really broke a law, but because the laws in his country were unjust. And yet in spite of that, he chose a deliberate path that allowed him and empowered him to get through 27 years in prison, allowed him to come back without a scintilla of anger or bitterness, but instead just wanted to create value for more people, just wanted to build a better community, a better life. That's what inspired me to get through the 26 years that I served in prison. And I'm hoping that through these lessons of masterminds, you too will find a way to overcome, to become something more than current circumstances and prepare for a better outcome. And to quickly recap how we do that, I will share the very quick recap. Now, I've presented already 7 videos to go along with this course. You will have access to this book right here in PDF form that you can read about these lessons and apply them to your life. And of course, you'll have access to an abundance of podcasts where I will not only share the strategies that worked for me, but I will also interview other people who went through periods of time in prison but emerged successfully. Or I'll interview employers, and they will be talking about what they would expect for somebody in confinement who wants to really transition into the job market and build a career. So, you've got an abundance of content here. There is no reason that you can't say, regardless of where I am today, I can build something more tomorrow. How do I do it? I follow this Earning Freedom Mastermind course. What is it? Starts with your values. Remember, define who you are, who you profess to be. Don't allow your current circumstances or situations to dictate your life. When I went to prison, I was facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole because of foolish criminal decisions I started making when I was 20 years old. And I just didn't want to always be identified by those bad decisions. So what did I have to do? Had to establish my own value categories. And in the beginning, as I have spoken about repeatedly and I've written about extensively, in the beginning it was a 3-pronged approach for me. Not necessarily the same for everybody else. This is how I define success. Number 1, define success by focusing on what my avatars would expect of me, the people that I wanted to meet in the future. What would they expect of me? I concluded they would want me to have 3 prongs. 1, focus on my education. 2, focus on contributing to society. 3, focus on building a support network. That's as simple as it gets, really just distilled down to the basics. Education, contribution to society, building a support network. But how would I define it? How would I define whether I was truly executing on that plan of leading this values-based life? It was the clearly defined goals that I'd set. What was education? I didn't think about me. I thought about what my avatars would want. University degree. They would want me to, how would they define me to have a contribution to society? I thought about it. I thought maybe it's publishing. If I could publish, I'm going to transcend these walls. I'm going to connect with society. More people are going to learn about me, and that's also going to help me with my 3rd prong, which is to find 10 people that I don't know and that didn't know me and persuade those people to believe in me. If I could do that, if I could execute on that model, then I believed that I would have a different outcome. Question to you, what are the values by which you profess to live? 2, what are the clearly defined goals that you've set within those value categories? And are you able to execute on those every single day as this time passes on? Because once you've done that, you've satisfied the prerequisites of this Earning Freedom Mastermind course. And that's something that you might be able to do in a while. It took me, I would say, several days or weeks of really introspecting and contemplating my life and what bad decisions I had made that had put me inside of that jail cell. And I just had to introspect and say, okay, how am I going to change that? Once I'd come up with that strategy that I learned from masterminds, then I could embark upon this really deliberate path. And it began with what? The right attitude. What's the right attitude? 100% commitment to success as you define success. Then I could have this aspiration. What was that aspiration? It was to come out just as I am doing right now in this extraordinarily beautiful community, living a life where nobody knows that I served time in prison. Well, everybody does because I'm always talking about it. But the reason I talk about it is I let people know if you can go through 26 years in prison and come out successfully, what can you do? Anybody can do the same if we follow this path of masterminds. So an aspiration is the second approach. The third, of course, is what? Incremental action steps. Without that action, without that commitment to taking incremental action steps, you never really move the needle. You never advance. And then, of course, we need to have the accountability metrics that we set, our own accountability metrics with clear timelines, with clear barometers for success along the way, because sometimes it's hard to be looking years into the future or not realizing the results or the fruit of your labor for until the end of your sentence. You've got to be celebrating every achievement along the way. And so that's why you need incremental action steps. And we're talking today about celebrating achievements. So you set those incremental action steps, you use accountability logs, and then when you're doing this, what happens? You become aware of more opportunities that are available to everybody there. But because you're on this path of masterminds, because you are following in the footsteps of giants like Socrates and Mandela and Gandhi, and even I always look to successful business leaders of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Jack Welch and so many others. That is the reason that you're going to excel, because you're focused on that, and you become aware of opportunities. I can assure you, the opportunities that opened for me were available to every other individual that served time with me, but not all of them were on this deliberate path. And I don't blame them. I know that while you're living apart from the people you love and the people who love you, it's very difficult to sustain a high level of energy and discipline. So it's really crucial that you think about it, you figure out how you are going to grow and become something bigger, better. You're going to become a part of something bigger than yourself. That's when you grow. And when you're doing that, when you're living that way, guess what? You don't only become aware of opportunities, but the world becomes aware of you, and they have a vested interest in your success, as I discussed in the last video. And I want you to be thinking about that. I want you to be just thinking, how has that applied in your own life? What people have opened opportunities for you? Why? Because they knew you. People invest in people, right? If you're the type of guy or the type of woman who other people look to as being responsible, deliberate, goal-oriented, they want to see you succeed. And that's what I experienced through each of the 9,500 days that I served. That's what has opened opportunities for me since I have returned to society. And that's why I know that my life is different from what anybody would have expected it to be. So that's what I wanted to recap. And the important thing to say is that if you've got to sustain this model for a long period of time, well, that's why you need to embrace this concept of achievement, of celebrating every achievement. That's what this module is all about. And you'll read about it in the lesson plan. But I just wanted to take a moment of spending this time and talking with you about how important it is to celebrate these small achievements inside. I was always on a 5-year plan all the way through. Ever since I embarked upon this mastermind strategy, for me, it was always a 5-year plan. Why? Because I couldn't contemplate 26 years in prison. It was just too... I hadn't even been alive that long when I started on the journey. And to think, oh God, I'm going to have to do this for 26 years, that would have been debilitating for me. That would have stopped me. And so I would say, okay, in 5 years, this is what I am going to achieve. But even 5 years is a long time. So I would set these incremental goals along the way, these incremental action steps that would help me. And I want to give you some very concrete examples of what I did and little strategies that I did that I could celebrate achievement. I'll remember when I first started on this, I was back, I think it was 1988. I was inside of the penitentiary, and I'd already made this commitment to focus on education. And I, of course, wanted to educate myself, and I did that by reading. And I was reading these books, but I can tell you that every time I read a paragraph, I'd come across, if a paragraph of a couple hundred words, I might come across 5 words or 4 words that I just didn't understand. My vocabulary was not very strong when I started in prison. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that I didn't know words. I remember the first word that I saw, it was cynical. And I had no idea what it meant. And I felt kind of humiliated and embarrassed. I said, God, I don't even know what this means. But what do you do when you find that you don't know a word? A lot of times what I used to do is I just skip over it. But instead, I could find that this could be an opportunity for me to develop a very clear goal and then to execute that goal and celebrate the achievement as I made progress along the way. You could do the same thing. What was my goal? My goal was to say, first of all, let me study language a little bit. Let me just get an understanding of how many words are in the English language. And through that research, I'm going back 25 years, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm wrong, but I'm just going to throw out some numbers of what I remember today, and that should show you a little bit about the value or the importance this message or lesson had on me back then when I was locked inside of that prison cell. I looked up vocabulary, and as I recall, there were about 1 million words in the English language. 1 million words. Okay, that's a lot of words. And I didn't, I just said, 1 million words. And then I thought, well, if there's 1 million words, how many words are in the average person's vocabulary? And so this research that I was doing, I think it was a book on sociology or something along those lines. And it told me, I don't know what you'd think. I'll give a second and say, what do you think is the number of words that the average user has in their vocabulary? And the average user they considered somebody with a 9th grade education. Or maybe it was an 11th grade education. 9th or 11th grade education. Maybe I think it was 11th grade. So in 11th grade, somebody with an 11th grade education, how many words are in their vocabulary? Well, you think there's 1 million words in the total English language. How many does this group have, at their command? And I was surprised because, as I recall, it was only something like 1,000 words. So out of 1 million, you only know 1,000 words, the average spoken person. And I thought, wow, that's not very many. And there was a difference between the number of words that you have in your spoken vocabulary, which is less than in your written vocabulary. Because we might only use about 600 words, but we have a total of 1,000 words that we know. Okay? And then it went on and said, so if that group has, the average person has 1,000, what about somebody who is really articulate, really well-spoken, somebody who makes a living using words, like a writer or a lawyer or a teacher or a broadcaster? So those people, they make a living with words. It's obvious that they would have a bigger vocabulary because the vocabulary, the words they use are the tools that they have to persuade. And I found that I think it was like 3,000 words. So it's not that much. Remember, there's 1 million words out there, but people only generally use 1,000 to 3,000 words. So that gave me the opportunity to set a very clear goal. And my goal that I set was that, okay, I'm going to learn 500 words. I'm going to build a vocabulary of 500 words. And I remember I was learning words like lexicon and, so I'm going to build my own lexicon. Lexicon is like a dictionary, a database of words. And so I said, I'm going to create my own lexicon. That was one of the words that I used. And I said, I'm going to put 500 words into that lexicon. And the surprising thing is that I've got a very clear goal. And I said, in the next 3 months or the next 6 months, or maybe it was this year, I'm going to learn 500 new words. Well, when you set a very clear goal like that, you can reverse engineer it. 500, even that's a lot. But if I broke it down and to say I'm going to learn 20 words a week, That's a little different. That's not so bad. That's very easily measurable because I was reading. I'd come across 3 or 4 words that I don't know. My process was really quite simple. Again, I take my pen, I write the word down while I'm reading. I get the dictionary. I write the definition down. I used to also write the part of speech because I wanted to become a better communicator. So I had to learn the difference between a noun, a verb, an adverb, an adjective, things of that sort. So I remember writing the word, the part of speech, the definition, and then I would use it in a sentence in my own way. Put it on a sheet of paper. Every time I had 20, then I would transfer that onto a sheet of index cards, and I'd carry the index cards in my pocket. And whenever I walked around the prison, I'd have that sheet of index cards in my pocket, right? Other guys are looking at, fantasy football. Fantasy football didn't exist, but they're just looking at the standings, or they're looking at sports, or they're looking at these other things. And that's awesome. It's fun. But is that really advancing you to what you want to become? Well, I can tell you something. When I set that goal of learning 500 words, and I put them in my pocket, and it was very clearly defined, every week I'd have to learn 20, I'd carry that thing around, and every time I was standing in line, and if you're in prison, you're standing in a lot of lines. You're standing in line to go to the chow hall, you're standing in line to take your clothes to the laundry, you're standing in line waiting for mail call, you're standing in line trying to get through the gates, the security gates, or get out to the yard or whatever. Have your words with you. Instead of just BSing and talking, flip through those words. And guess what you're doing? You're empowering yourself. And as you get through that 20 and you say, wow, I now have 20 new words in my mind. And that is a currency that I can use to influence more people, to reach more people. It is empowering me, even while I am in prison. And that strategy, that approach gave me a sense that I can do more. I can instead of learning 20 words, I can learn 25. I can learn 30. And I got a little secret for you. By the time I got to 500 new words, remember, average person only has 1,000. I could effectively get 50% more just by learning 500 words in a deliberate manner. If I learned 500 new words, I would have a 50% higher vocabulary than most other people. And that would give me a little bit more power to influence them, to persuade them to believe in me, to help me reach my goals. And it's what you can do as well. So that strategy, I can tell you something magical happened when I got to 500. Guess what it was? As I was reading, I didn't have to go to the dictionary so often. Why? Because now my vocabulary became richer. I began using it in sentences. I would write letters and try to incorporate it so it's in my spoken vocabulary, not only my written vocabulary. And I can tell you that I felt a sense of achievement. That was the type of incremental achievement that I hit in steps along the way. And so I have to give every one of these episodes, I've got to give a sponsorship message. So let me just say right now, my sponsorship message is going to be to iTunes, okay? I'm going to ask all of you, I'm not getting any benefit from iTunes in the sense of monetary compensation, but I can tell you the benefit that I am getting and why I'm going to ask you to support the Earning Freedom podcast on iTunes. Because Apple really expands the distribution of Earning Freedom in accordance with the number of people who subscribe and the number of ratings and reviews that we have on the show. So if you are outside in the community and you are listening to this program, I want you to know what we're doing with this program. We are piping it into prisons across the United States. Right now, we're in the state of Maine. We're getting into the state of Washington. We're going into the state of Alaska, into the state of New Mexico. And I expect that in 2016, if I'm successful, if I hit these incremental goals, we will be in every state in the United States. And we will be working hard to influence and change the outcomes of our nation's prison system by empowering people to prepare themselves for success. And that is the way we move the needle. And if you can get behind that, I am asking you, please, go to iTunes, subscribe to the Earning Freedoms podcast. It is free, will not cost you one penny. Rate and review the show. And if you do that, that's what gets us more distribution. It gets us into more prisons, gets us into more schools, and we can influence more people who are living in difficult times or challenges, helping them understand how they can meet success. That's my sponsorship message today. If you want to support the program, that's one way that you can do it. Doesn't cost you anything except a little bit of your time. Love for you to do it. Thank you very much. Now let's get back to this module of celebrating incremental achievements. I told you about my passion for developing my vocabulary. But there were other ways that I used this strategy to grow. There was a commitment to fitness. I could measure how many miles I would run. I can tell you, I was a runner in prison. I started off, and why was I a runner? Because running was hard for me naturally. I was not a natural athlete. But with discipline and commitment, I could turn myself into a long distance runner. And by the end of my journey, I was running, a lot. I wrote about it in my books, but I ran hundreds of marathons in prison, and I did it for a reason, because I wanted to pull back some measurement of control into my life. The prison system, by its very nature, it separates me from a level of autonomy and a level of independence, but I wanted to do what the system said I couldn't do, what I didn't think that I could do. And as I set these goals and achieved them, I somehow liberated myself. I liberated myself in the sense of saying, I have some control over my own destiny. You can do the same. Earlier in my journey, it wasn't running, it was weight training. And I used to be a bodybuilder in prison, and I got really pumped up during my first, I guess it was 8 years, from when I was 23 till I was about 30 years old, and I was all into exercising. But it was those same principled approach, okay? You want to get a 300-pound bench. What do? Well, you set these goals. This week, I'm going to hit chest on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm going to hit arms on Wednesdays and Fridays. I'm going to hit back on this day. And you'd set these same types of incremental things. Those of you who work out, you know what I'm talking about. But here's the challenge. Is this going to relate to the success that you want to achieve in your future? I can tell you about one friend of mine. His name was Alan, and he had an awesome physique. I mean, he worked out crazy, right? I think he had like a 450 bench. He was only weighed like 180, just totally ripped. And that was his whole devotion. And I used to ask him, when I'd see him in there, I said, what's this going to do for your future? How are you going to succeed when you get out? And he'd say, when I get out, I'm just going to start a business. But he didn't have any clarity, that same level of clarity of what he was going to do with starting a business or what he was going to do about getting a job as he had with his fitness routine. Well, the sad thing is when I was in the halfway house, I got out, I transitioned from the prison in Atwater, California, to a halfway house in San Francisco in the year 2012, and I served a year in that halfway house. And while I was there, I happened to come across Alan again. He got released about the same time as I did, or just a bit after me. And I was already transitioning into home confinement when he was just getting there. And he told me that he was homeless and he couldn't get a job. And it took him like a year before he was able to get his first job. And it was ripped. He was in good shape. And he ends up getting a job in a fitness center, but it hardly paid enough for him to earn a livable wage. And it was just life was a big challenge for him. I'm not telling you that to dissuade you from focusing on fitness, but what I'm asking you to do is to figure out the relationship between the goals that you set, the achievements that you celebrate, and your long-term vision of what you want to become. I urge you, look at the data. The data is very clear. It's all over the newspapers. Our nation has a problem with mass incarceration. The longer we expose somebody to corrections, the less likely that person is to function upon release. And you can sit and complain about it, or you can say, you know what? I got to live in the world as it exists, not as I want it to be. And I have to do something about it. The goals that I achieve, the achievements that I celebrate, should have a relationship to who I want to be in 5 years down the road, in 10 years down the road, in 20 years down the road. If you want to come out of prison and be a homeowner, if you want to come out of prison and have a job, if you want to come out of prison and be stable and strong, I want you to anticipate the challenges that you are going to face. And if you can anticipate those challenges, then you can embark upon a very clearly defined plan, a mastermind plan that will say, I'm going to break through. I am going to succeed even though there are a number of obstacles that separate me from possibilities. Now, I can tell you, when I was teaching in prison, I used to use this story from the movie Heat. Now, I don't know if you've seen the movie Heat, but it was an awesome movie with two characters that I really admire, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. Al Pacino was a police officer, a detective, and Robert De Niro was a bank robber. And they were both at the top of their game. And they were like the head stars of this movie. But there was also another character in that movie that has a storyline that I really remember. And I used to use this to teach. The guy's name, I don't remember his name, but he was the president of one of the seasons during 24. He was also, he's a spokesman for Allstate, that very tall, distinguished African-American guy with a deep voice. And he had this character where he was, a shot caller on the yard in Folsom or in some prison. And, that was his role. When he got out of prison, he had some lousy job as a short order cook, and he felt belittled. And I remember at the beginning of at the scene, he's there and he's going into this job, and his girlfriend's sitting next to him, and she reaches over and says, "Please, baby, please, can you just do it for me? Just go into this job," because she knew he didn't want to go into the job, and he hated it. He was a shot caller on the yard, and now he's in society and he's nobody. He's got nothing. He says, "Yeah, I can handle it, baby. There's nothing I can't handle." So he goes into the job and tries to position himself as a cook, but the job, the supervisor's not hearing any of it. Gives him some lousy, dirty job washing dishes. He hates it. He hates his life. You can see that he hates his life. You can see that he's miserable. And then at the end of the movie, De Niro sees him. And De Niro's about ready to rob a bank. He's right in the moment, and he loses his driver. For some reason or other, he loses his driver, and he sees this dude that he knew at Folsom, and he goes up, hey, they kick it for a second, and De Niro tells him, "Look, right now I got to know yes or no, got a job, need a driver, are you in or are you out?" And the character, he sits back and he thinks about it for a second. Before you know it, boom, he throws off his 8%, let's go. Why did he do that? He did that because he didn't like his life. He wasn't fulfilled. He was living in an environment that he didn't feel respected. And when he was in prison, he felt as if he had that respect. And so he went to the stage, and this is all just my interpretation of the movie. You might have a different interpretation. But his thoughts were, I'd rather go rob this bank and try and get my money than sit here and work on this job that I can't stand. Well, as a consequence of that, of course, it ended with him participating in this bank robbery, and he was killed. And that happened for so many people I interviewed, so many people who are around you right now. They left prison never intending to come back, but because they found a society that wasn't so receptive to bringing them back, giving them an opportunity or opening job opportunities for them, it was only a matter of time before they reverted to the type of behavior that brought them back into the prison system. And so when you're setting these goals, when you are celebrating these achievements, my question for you is, what thoughts have you given to the avatars you're going to meet in the future? And how are they going to respond to your adjustment? Are they going to look at you for the crime that you committed, or are they going to look at you for the way that you responded to that crime? And if you can persuade them to see you in a manner that they admire and respect, do you advance the possibility of them opening new opportunities for you? I can tell you, and I will tell you in the final episode, of how that strategy not only got me through prison, but opened enormous opportunities for me since I have returned to society and continue to do so. Why do I do it? Because I want you to experience the same level of success, not only when you're going through prison, but when you get on the other side of the door, right? You could focus on being the king of the television, awesome. You got to turn the channel and, nobody's going to do anything. Or you might be able to control, one area of the yard. Cool, right? No disrespect to that. But is that going to relate in you getting a job when you get out? Is that going to relate in a bank extending you credit? Is that going to relate in you becoming a homeowner? Is it going to relate in you earning the respect from somebody you meet in society who can help you? Or is it going to put you in a position where you're potentially vulnerable to getting back into the system? I've never known one person who left prison said, "I'm coming back." And I interviewed hundreds of people in prison. People in prison are my brothers. I want to help them. But I have to help them by being honest and letting you know it is not easy. You're going to come back to society. You'll have fewer opportunities. There are going to be people who don't want to give you an opportunity. You've got to say, I am going to understand that, and I'm going to succeed anyway. And if you follow these principles of masterminds, these principles that are taught in this course, these principles that I speak about on these podcasts, you are going to succeed. And I'm determined to help you. I'm Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com. And I thank you for giving me another opportunity to share. This is episode number 8 in the program, the Earning Freedom program. We've got 2 more in this video series. Got an unlimited supply of podcasts. So thanks very much.